One income used to build a life. Two incomes now barely hold one together. Same country, same work ethic, different math. The question isn't what happened to your generation. The question is, when exactly did the math stop working? And why didn't anyone tell you? This is moral economy talk. We live in a time where people are working harder than ever and falling further behind, where families feel more pressure even when they are doing more right, where the gap between effort and outcome has never been wider, and nobody explains why. This podcast exists to close that gap, to take the intersection of money, family, and values and talk about it like adults, not with political spin, not with financial jargon designed to make you feel small, just a clear thinking from someone who has lived the pressure, done the work, and refuses to pretend the system is the same as it was. Because economics isn't just numbers on a government report, it's a dinner table argument you didn't want to have. It is a 2 in the morning moment when you look at the ceiling and wonder if you made the right choices. It is exhaustion that has nothing to do with the laziness. This is moral economy talk. I'm your host, Aleksandar Balta. Let's get into it. I want to start with a simple question, and I want you to actually sit with it for a moment before I keep going. What did your parents' generation need to do to buy a home, raise a family, have something left over at the end of the month? For most of you, the answer is going to sound almost mythological at this point. One job, one income, a trade position, a factory floor, a trucking route, a middle management role at a company that actually stayed in the same city for more than 5 years. Nothing exceptional, just steady work, 5 days a week, and math worked out. My father is that story. He came from Yugoslavia with essentially nothing. No connections, limited English, no inheritance, no network, no head start. What he had was willingness to show up every single day and do the work. 40 hours a week. He built a life, he built a home, he raised kids, he gave us stability. Not luxury. I want to be clear about that. But the quiet certainty of knowing the basics were covered. The future was manageable. And I think about my dad a lot lately because I look at what my kids face, what your kids face. And the equation has completely changed. The math that worked for him does not work anymore, not even close. Today, we work those same 40 hours. Some of us work 50, 60 hours. We have more education than our parents, more technology, more access to information than any generation in history. We are by almost every measure more productive workers than generation before us. And we are still doing the math at month's end, trying to figure out how something is supposed to add up that doesn't. Comfort became a struggle. Normal became a dream, and the finish line kept moving while we were running towards it. Now, here's something I hear constantly, and I want to address it directly before we go further. The argument goes like this: your parents' generation worked harder, they sacrificed more, they didn't have iPhones and streaming service and expensive coffee. They were more disciplined, and this, what you're feeling, is a result of poor choices and a weak character. I get where that came from. I understand the instinct behind it. But Here's what I need you to understand. The argument is designed to make system problem feel like a personal failure. It shifts the responsibility from math to person doing the math. And once you believe it's your fault, you stop asking the harder question, which is what actually changed? So let's answer that. Not with an opinion, with the numbers that shifted while everyone was busy telling you to budget harder and sacrifice more. Because I know from my own life, working heavy equipment, working 5 jobs simultaneously, talking to people across North America who are all carrying the same invisible weight. This is not about laziness. It's not about bad decisions. Something structural changed. And if you don't understand what changed, you will spend the rest of your life blaming yourself for a problem you did not create. Here's something else worth saying before we get into the numbers. The people who most loudly say your generation just needs to work harder are very often people who bought their homes at a specific moment in economic history that cannot be replicated. They bought it in 1980s or 1990s when price to income ratio was 3 to 1 instead of 10 to 1. They watched their home triple or quadruple in value, and now they're sitting on a generational wealth transfer that they did not earn through discipline. They captured through timing, and experience of that good timing made the effort feel like the cause. But effort was never the difference. The math was. I'm not saying they did not work hard. Most of them did. I'm saying that the hard work in 1988 with 3 to 1 housing ratio produces a fundamentally different outcome than the hard work today with 12 to 1 ratio. Same effort, different system. And confusing the outcome with the cause is how we end up blaming the wrong thing. Let's look at what actually changed. Let me give you a single most clarifying number in this entire conversation. I want you to hold it. In 1970s in Canada, a home cost approximately 2 to 3 times the average annual household income. If your family brought a home 30,000 a year and a home was 60 to 90,000, you had to stretch, you had to save, you had to commit. But it was reachable. One income, few years of discipline and effort, the math worked. Today, in Vancouver, the average home sits between 1.3 and 1.9 million, depending on type and location. Median household income in Metro Vancouver is approximately $90,000 a year. That is not 2 or 3 times income. That is like 13 to 20 times income. The Bank of Canada's own housing affordability research has confirmed this gap is wide as it has ever been in recorded Canadian history. Same country, same hard work, a generation ago, 3 times income, today 20 times. The ratio did not drift slowly, it collapsed. And I want to be specific about what means practically. Someone buying a home in Vancouver today on a median income will need to save every single dollar they earn, not spend on cent on a food, rent, clothing, transportation, or anything else for approximately 15 years just to accumulate a down payment. That is not a housing market. That is a closed door with a sign on it that says you should have been born earlier. Toronto is the same story. And people selling you the just save harder narrative, a lot of them bought homes in Toronto for $180,000 in 1997, and they don't save harder than you. They bought it at the right moment in a system that has since completely rewritten the rules. Edmonton, my city, Calgary, for a long time, we were the safety valve when Vancouver and Toronto became possible. People came to Alberta, and it worked for a while. But in the last 3 to 4 years, rents in Edmonton have increased 30 to 40%, according to Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporate data. Rental vacancy rates hit historic lows in 2023 and 2024 across major Alberta markets. The escape route closed. Ottawa, Halifax, Moncton, every city that was positioned as affordable alternative caught the same wave. There's no affordable Canada left to flee to. For my American listeners, because this is a North American problem, not Canadian one, let me show you the same wall with different numbers. The median home price in the United States reached approximately 430,000 in 2024, according to National Association of Realtors. In 2000, the same median was around 165,000. Median household income in America today is roughly $80,000. In 2000, it was about $42,000. Income roughly doubled. Home prices more than tripled. The gap opened up. But the national media obscures how bad it is in the places where the jobs actually are. In California, the median home price exceeds 800,000 at least. In New York Metro, 600,000 at least. In Seattle, 700,000. In those markets, the price to income ratio is 8 to 12 times. Coastal cities where entire industries are based, where young people are supposed to go to build careers, have priced out very workers who keep these cities running. Phoenix, Arizona, between 2019 and 2023, home values in Phoenix increased by over 70%, according to the Case-Shiller Home Price Index. Not gradually, in 4 years. Nurses, teachers, firefighters, and essential workers who run the daily operation of major American city priced out. Austin, Nashville, Boise, those were supposed to be the affordable alternatives. People fled there from expensive coast. Price followed them. San Francisco, average rent for a one-bedroom apartment exceeds $3,000 a month. Not a mortgage, monthly rent. You're paying $36,000 a year for privilege of not being homeless in one of the wealthiest cities on earth. And you're building zero equity while doing it. Now, let me tell you about my friend in Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville was supposed to be the proof point that affordable America still exists. Not a glamorous city, a working city with real jobs, real people doing real work. My friend is exactly that, a hard worker, a disciplined saver, kind of person who follows the financial advice industry's playbook to the letter. Budget carefully, save your down payment, be patient, wait for the right property. He was doing it. He was getting close. Then 2022 happened. COVID era, remote work, money moved. People from Atlanta, Miami, New York looked at Jacksonville home prices and saw a bargain compared to where they came from. So they came, and they brought bigger savings and then remote work salaries, and Jacksonville price jumped 30 to 50% in 18 months. My friend's savings, everything he had carefully, patiently built, the market outpaced them month by month while he was building them. His solution? He bought an RV, a hardworking man, a disciplined saver, person who did everything right, and financial rotation decision mathematically correct answer was to stop trying to buy a home and live in a vehicle instead. Not because he failed, because the market failed him. This is not a personal story. This is the systematic story wearing a personal face. Housing stopped being shelter. It became financial instrument, an investment vehicle, a store of wealth for people who already have wealth. And when a shelter becomes someone else's investment, the math stops working for the person who just needs a stable place to raise their kids. But let's come down from the big housing numbers for a moment, because I know some of you are renting and thinking the housing market isn't my immediate crisis. My immediate crisis is getting to the month. And you are right. The pressure is not just at the mortgage level. It is happening every single week at the grocery store, at the utility portal, and on a childcare invoice. Let me describe a scene I think most of you know personally. You're at a grocery store, not a specialty shop, not organic market, a regular chain grocery store. You put in what you always put in: protein, chicken, and ground beef, maybe some eggs, vegetable, bread, milk, fruit for the kids, the staples. The cart that has fed your family for years. 2 or 3 years ago, the cart was 150, maybe 180 on a high week. Now you get to checkout and number says 260, 280. And there is this moment, a split second before you process it, where you think there must be a mistake. You look at what is in the cart, same thing, same amount, different number. The Bank of Canada documented food price inflation averaging above 8% annually in 2022 and 2023. In the United States, the USDA tracked cumulative grocery price increase over 25% between 2020 and 2024. A cart that cost $200 in 2020 costs $250 now from food inflation alone, before any other cost increases. The moment the checkout is not anxiety, it is information. It is your hour of work quietly buying less life than he's used to. Now, let me tell you about a phone call from a friend in Northwest Calgary last winter. She called, and her voice had that edge. You know, the edge that tight control tone people use when they try not to spiral when they are right on the edge of it. She had opened her utility bill, water, gas, electricity for a month. Alberta winter, so I expect to be significant. She told me the total $750, and I asked, what was the actual usage portion? How much did you consume? She said about 150 for a family of 4 people. $600 of $750 utility bill was service fees, not usage, not the heat that kept her family warm, not the electricity that powered their lives. The fee for being connected to the infrastructure at all. A monthly charge for privilege of existing inside a system. I pulled up my own Edmonton bill while I was on the phone with her. My total was that month $320. My service fees $268. Before one light switch was flipped, before one burner on the stove was turned on, $268 just to be a customer. You cannot negotiate service fees. You cannot reduce them by conserving energy. You cannot shop around for better rate on most utility infrastructure. You just pay them every month, whether you're at home or not, and they tend to increase every year with no direct connection to any performance standard. For my American listeners, the structure looks differently, but delivers the same result. Utility deregulation in states like Texas creates a market where energy companies can price what the market will bear. Texans experienced this volatility during the 2021 winter storm when some customers received a bill for $5,000 to $10,000. And even in normal months, the layer fee architecture on American utility bills, distribution charge, capacity charge, demand charge, transmission fees, means a substantial portion of what you pay has nothing to do what you actually consumed. And there is childcare. In Canada, outside of Quebec, childcare costs between $1,500 and $2,500 per month for one child in most major cities, according to Canadian Center of Policy Alternatives. In the United States, the Center for American Progress estimates average childcare costs of $1,300 to $2,500 per month, depending on the state, with Massachusetts, California, and New York regularly exceeding $2,000 per month for infant care. Think carefully about what this means for the two-income family. The second income, the one you went back to work to earn after having children, its entire purpose is often to pay the person watching your child while you earn the money to pay them. You are not getting ahead. You're running a treadmill that requires two people at a full speed just to stay in the same place. At the moment one person stumbles, a layoff, an illness, a car repair, you can't cover, the entire structure collapses. Groceries plus service fees plus childcare. This is the kitchen table war. An economist discussing household purchasing power in abstract percentage terms describing a world that does not match what you experience every single week. And for American listeners, I want to add one more item to the kitchen table that does not exist in the same form in Canada: healthcare. A medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States, according to research published in the American Journal of Public Health. Not a bad investment, not overspending on a lifestyle. Medical bills. You can work hard for 30 years, do everything right, build a solid financial foundation, and then have a medical event, a serious diagnosis, a hospital stay, a surgery, and the loss everything in a matter of months. This is not a fringe scenario. This is documented, quantified, statistically significant outcome for American families. A 2023 Kaiser Family Foundation survey found that 41% of American adults carry some form of medical debt. Not just uninsured people, people with insurance, people who thought they were covered. The deductibles, the out-of-pocket maximums, the co-insurance structures, the surprise billing from out-of-network providers. These create a system where having health insurance still does not protect you from financial catastrophe if something serious goes wrong. That fear, the background awareness, the one bad diagnosis could undo everything you have built, is a weight that Canadian families do not carry to the same degree. And it is a weight that sits on every financial decision American family makes, invisibly every day. It changes the risk you are willing to take and what jobs are willing to leave. What entrepreneurial chances you are willing to bet on. It keeps people locked into employer-provided insurance even when it's the wrong job, because the alternative is exposure to a system that can bankrupt you for getting sick. This is not a footnote to the kitchen table conversation. This is a kitchen table in America. So what is the engine underneath all of this? Why is this happening across countries, across different cities, different income level, different industries? When most people talk about inflation, they describe the symptom. Prices are going up without ever touching the cause. If you only understand the symptom, you spend your energy reacting to price tags instead of understanding the system producing them. Here's the image I want you to hold. A slow tire leak, not a blowout, not a sudden flat that strands you on a highway. A slow, nearly imperceptible pressure loss you drive every day. A tire looks fine from the outside, but daily, almost invisibly, it loses pressure. By week 3, the car pulls slightly. By week 6, fuel economy drops. By week 10, the ride is noticeably rougher. You're working harder, burning more fuel, covering the same distance, and you're expending more effort just to stay in the same place. That is what inflation does to your purchasing power. It is a slow drain on the value of your money. Your dollar buys less every year. The effect compounds. After decades, the tire is flat. You're doing twice the work to stay still, and because it happens gradually, you normalize each incremental step without ever seeing a full distance you drifted. And here's the part that matters most. Inflation does not hit everyone equally. If you own assets, a home, stock, land, those assets rise with inflation. Their monetary value increases. You are, in a language of economists, a winner. But if you earn a paycheck and rent your home, if your wealth is entirely in your labor rather than things you own, you're absorbing the losses daily. You're a loser, in their words. Every year, your purchasing power erodes a little more, and every year the distance between you and the first rung of the assets ownership ladder grows a little wider. Central banks, the Bank of Canada and Federal Reserve in the United States, have the ability to expand the money supply. More money in circulation means each existing dollar becomes worth slightly less over time. This has been a feature of modern monetary policy for over 50 years, 1972. It is used to stimulate economies, to manage government debt loads, to fund public spending in ways that don't require directly raising taxes. It is not a conspiracy. It's how the system is designed, how it continues to operate. The result is a slow structural transfer of purchasing power from people who earn wages to people who own assets. The homeowners' property rises with inflation. The wage earner's paycheck does not automatically adjust to match the real inflation in housing, childcare, healthcare, and education, categories that actually define a stable life. The official inflation figures are calculated using a broad basket of goods that doesn't weight major life expenses the way real families experience them. But I think about my dad when I explained this. He didn't know about the money supply growth or central bank policy. He didn't need to. He just knew his paycheck covered his life. And what stays with me is that my generation, we know all the terminology. We can explain inflation. We can name the mechanism. We understand the system better than our parents ever did. And we still cannot afford what they could. This is not progress. This is a system that has grown more sophisticated, extracting values from labor while the people doing the labor stood still. Let me put the actual numbers on the table. In 1970 in Canada, a factory worker earning between $7,000 to $9,000 a year could buy a home priced around $25,000. That is approximately 3 years of salary. Hard discipline, but mathematically achievable. Today, median wage in Canada is around $60,000 to $65,000. The national average home price exceeds $700,000. That is more than 10 years of salary before you spend a dollar on anything else. And that is the national average, not the major cities where most of the work is. In the United States, median household income is approximately $80,000. A national median home price around $430,000, 5.4 times income. But in California, the homes is $800,000. In New York Metro, $600,000. In those markets, ratio is 8 to 12 times income. The math that worked for your parents does not work in the cities where economy actually concentrates jobs. Wages did rise. Nobody disputes that. But essentially, that define a stable life. Housing, childcare, healthcare. In the United States, post-secondary education, those costs did not just outpace wages. They lapped wages multiple times. And the gap between them has made median families structurally worse off than their parents at the same age, despite working longer hours and being, by every productivity measure, more efficient. Now, here's what I want to tell you to feel this rather than just understanding it. Stop measuring your life in dollars. Dollars are weakened currency subject to everything we just talked about. Measure your life in time. You earn $20 an hour after tax. Your monthly rent is $1,600. It's not $1,600. It is 80 hours of your life. 2 complete work weeks just to put a roof over your head before you buy a single meal, pay a single bill, or put $1 towards your future. That $700,000 home is not $700,000 At $20 an hour, that is 35,000 hours of your working life. At 40 hours a week, that is 875 work weeks, almost 17 years of entire gross income before interest, before property tax, before a single repair. My Edmonton utility bill with 268 in service fees is not 268. It's 13 hours to be considered customer before consuming a watt of electricity, a carbon gas when a measure in your life instead of weakened currency. The moral weight of the system become impossible to ignore, and decisions that felt abstract become very clear. Which expenses are generally worth the hour of your life, and you're trading for them, which is simply the cost of existing in a system that has made the basics more expensive than the labor it requires to produce them. You're not imagining it. You're not a bad with money. The math changed, and until now, nobody explained how. When the math stops working, but the expectations don't change, something has to fill the gap. And for 50 years, the gap has been filled by debt. Debt became normal, not dramatically, not in a single policy announcement or cultural shift that everyone noticed, gradually, incrementally, so slowly that by the time most people looked up, it was already their baseline reality. Think about how your grandparents talked about debt. For the generation, debt carried genuine social weight. You paid it off as fast as you could. You lived below your means. Borrowing money was something you did with a banker, with some humility, and pay back with urgency. Carrying debt was a problem to eliminate, not balance to manage. Now think about how adulthood begins today. There is an entire industry, a multi-trillion-dollar financial service industry, whose business model depends on normalizing debt. Credit card companies spend billions on marketing design to reframe borrowing as a lifestyle tool. By now, pay later. Platforms have specifically targeted younger customers with explicit strategy of making debt feel like a future rather than a cost. The language around a debt changed deliberately. You do not borrow money you don't have. You split it into easy payments. You don't go into debt for vacation. You invest in your experiences. A financial industry hired the best behavioral economists in the world to study exactly how to remove the psychological friction that used to make debt feel serious. And it worked. The result is a generation that has been systematically prepared from the first credit card offer in college to be comfortable carrying debt as a permanent state, not as an emergency tool, as a lifestyle accessory. And the math of that shift, the compound interest, the minimum payment treadmill, the cascading effect on every other financial decision does not show up until years later. In the United States, total student loan debt exceeds 1.7 trillion according to Federal Reserve data. The average borrower carries over 37,000 student debt before their first paycheck from a professional job. They begin their work lives already running a deficit, not from recklessness, but because the cost of credential required to access the economy has increased faster than incomes could absorb. American tuition inflation has outpaced general inflation by a factor of 4 since 1980, according to the Department of Education. That is not a natural market outcome. It is a policy failure. In Canada, the average student graduates with approximately $26,000 to $28,000 in debt, according to Statistics Canada. Then comes the car loan to reach the job, the credit card flowed for the month when timing doesn't line up, the buy now, pay later for something needed this month but not covered until next paycheck. Statistics Canada and Bank of Canada report that Canadian household debt currently sits at approximately 180 to 185% of disposable income. That means that every dollar a Canadian household brings home, they collectively owe close to $2. In the United States, the Federal Reserve reports total household debt above 17.7 trillion. Credit card debt alone surpassed 1.3 trillion for the first time in 2023. Now it's closer to $3 trillion. And the Federal Reserve's own survey of consumer financial found that approximately 40% of American adults cannot cover $400 emergency expense without borrowing money or selling something. 40%. In the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, 4 in 10 people cannot absorb a 400 unexpected expense without going into debt. This is not poverty statistic about a specific demographic. This is a structural statement about what 50 years of math not working has done to the average person. I live this, not as a statistic, as a person. 2000, I was carrying $48,000 in debt. The number had a physical weight. It had a sound. Every time the phone rang at certain hours, my stomach tightened before I could even think about whether to answer. How did I get there? Not through recklessness, through what life costs when the math is already working against you. Costs accumulating over time, moves, starting over, slow gap between what comes in and what needs to go out, widening just slowly enough that you don't sound alarm until you sit down one day and look at the real number. I decided to work it out. 5 jobs, 15 to 20 hours a day for 18 months. Towel shop in the weekends, Nike retail afternoon, job doing massage therapy, security work late nights and weekends, transit driving on early morning weekdays, 5 days a week. What does 20 hours a day actually mean? It means you wake before the city wakes. You get home after the city has gone to sleep. Weekends become abstract, concept that applies to other people. You move past the point where you are tired. On commitment to an outcome because the alternative is unacceptable. 18 months later, it was gone. And the feeling wasn't just relief. It was physical, the sensation of time returning to me. My hours were mine again. But here's the math that has never left me. 48,000 at $20 an hour is 2,400 hours of life, 6 full weeks of work, and a year and a half of working hard, and I spent paying back the past before I could start building the future. That is what debt is at its core. It is your future, hours, pre-sold. It is tomorrow's time already spent on yesterday's cost. And when normal life, just the standard cost of being an adult in modern city, requires debt to function, the trap is not a personal failure. It is a system feature that not weak for being inside it. The answer was built smooth. Numbers don't stay in spreadsheets. They come home, they sit at the dinner table, they change the quality of silence in the room. Those 18 months fighting $48,000 of debt, that was also the beginning of the most important relationship of my life. My wife was entering at it right there, in the middle of the war. The reality she was walking into, a man working 20 hours a day, dodging calls from collection agencies, carrying something that wasn't just stress. It was shame. Stress says, I have a lot to handle. Shame says, I'm not enough. A financial shame, the specific shame of working every available hour and still not providing what you believe you should. That shame does something different to a person than regular exhaustion. It makes you quieter when you should be talking. It makes you smaller in the moments that need you present. One night stands out above everything else from that period. I had worked 18-hour day, got home at 2 in the morning. She was awake, sitting there, waiting. not angry, not accusatory, not asking questions, just quiet. The the silence was the hardest thing I have experienced in a relationship. Not because she said something cruel. She didn't, because she didn't have to. The quiet communicated everything that financial pressure had done to the space between us without either of us choosing it, without either of us failing the other, without anyone doing anything wrong. Pressure doesn't just take your time, it takes your ability to show up as a person they deserve. I built the life eventually. I escaped the debt, but the cost was presence, moments I wasn't there for. The version of myself she deserved to have from the beginning that was instead occupied with survival. And I tell you that story not because I want sympathy. I tell it because millions of people are living version of that story right now. In Edmonton and Calgary, in Phoenix and Jackson, in every city where the math stopped working. They love their parents deeply. They are working as hard as they can, and the financial pressure is changing the atmosphere of their homes in ways that have nothing to do with the quality of their love. Financial stress is documented as the number one driver of relationship conflict in North America, according to a survey by both the American Psychological Association and the Veneer Institute of the Family in Canada. Not incompatibility, not loss affection, money. Specifically pressure on money not being enough. It is the leading thing that fractures the relationship. Money fights are almost never about money. They're about fear, about the gap between the life we are told was achievable and the numbers that keep telling you it isn't. When two people are having that fight, they are not actually fighting each other. They're fighting the system, but the system isn't in the room. So they fight each other. The two income reality today, both partners leave early, both return exhausted. Dinner is rushed, kids are in bed, relationship operates in logistic mode, coordination, scheduling, dividing tasks rather than in the connecting mode that sustains it. Weekends become recovery time rather than a family time. The relation functions, but functions below the level it deserves to operate at, not from lack of love, from lack of margin. And children feel this, not through any explanation, not because anyone told them. Children are extraordinarily sensitive to emotional atmosphere of home. They absorb adult anxiety without framework to understand it. They cannot name inflation or debt to income ratios, but they know when something is wrong in the room. And they carry that quiet knowledge with them. You can love your family deeply and show up to them exhausted. You can have a strong marriage and feel disconnected under financial pressure. You can do everything right and still feel like you are failing every day. This is not a weakness. This is what happens when a foundation is unstable and nobody acknowledges it. And here's something I want you to say directly to anyone listening who is in that place right now. The shame is the worst part, not the debt, not the tight budget, not even the arguments. The shame, the private voice that says you should be able to handle this, that the other people are managing it specifically. That voice is lying to you. It is taking a structural problem and locating it inside your character. And the people closest to you need to real you, the diminished version shame produces. Talk about it, not to perform vulnerability, because the person sitting across from you at the table is probably carrying the same weight in a different pocket. And two people who understand the actual problem they're facing together are significantly more capable of navigating it Then the two people, each quietly convinced it is their own private failure. Now, because I did not build this show to make you feel helpless, I built it to make you feel clear. And the clarity is always the beginning of action. There are things within your control right now, inside the system, that shifts your relationship to it. The first, change your unit of measurement. I gave you the time math earlier. Use it. Before every significant financial commitment this week, a contract, a subscription, a purchase you're considering, convert it to after tax hours of your life. That phone payment plan isn't $50 a month. At $20 an hour take home, it is 2.5 hours of your life every month for 24 months. Is it worth 60 hours? Sometimes, yes. The point is making the decision from clarity rather than from numbing abstraction of monthly dollar amount. Second, treat consumer debt like a medical problem, not with shame, with urgency. Credit card interest rates in Canada average 19 to 22. United States average credit card interest reached over 21% in 2023, according to Federal Reserve, the highest in 4 decades. Those rates are not designed to help you manage cash flow. They're designed to maximize how long you remain a customer. The minimum payment structure specifically exists to extend your repayment timeline and maximize the interest the institution collects. Understand the mechanism, then work against it as aggressively as your circumstances allow. Third, this is one is harder but important. Build any asset possible you can, as early as you can, even if it's small. Inflation dynamic we discuss rewards asset ownership. Even a modest position in the basic investment account starts to put you on the side of the equation that benefits from the system rather than purely absorbing its costs. It does not resolve the problem, but changes your relationship to it. And the fourth, talk about it dishonestly. The isolation of modern financial experience, everyone quietly struggling, nobody speaking in real numbers. It's part of what makes this manageable for the system. The most honestly, we speak about what things actually cost, what debt actually feels like, what math actually is in your specific city, in your specific income, the more clear we can see where the system is failing us versus where we have genuine agency. That conversation is what this show is trying to start. I want to be clear about something important here. None of these four things solves the structural problem. Time math does not fix a housing market with a 20-to-1 price ratio. Paying down consumer debt aggressively does not rebuild the wage to cost relationship that has eroded over 50 years. I'm not offering these as cures for systematic illness. I'm offering them as ways to navigate more clearly inside a system that was not designed with your best interest as a priority. Clarity and agency isn't a broken system is still meaningful better than confusion and paralysis inside it. And it is from clarity the larger demands, the political, the collective, the structural actually get built. And finally, because the question deserves a real answer, what would have to change at the system level for the math to start working again? On housing, supply is the most direct lever. The single most effective intervention for housing affordability is building significantly more homes in places people actually want to live, more density, more mixed use development, less restrictive zoning. Tokyo housing supply policy is the most cited example. Vienna's social housing model is another, have maintained substantial lower price to income ratios than comfortable cities that have not. This is not a secret or complicated discovery. It is political will. On wages, The connection between workers' productivity and work compensation has to be rebuilt. For example, 40 years worker productivity in North America increased substantially while real wages for the bottom half of earners stagnated. That gap went to corporate profit margins and asset appreciation. Policy tools to change this exist. Stronger collective bargaining frameworks, minimum wage index to actual regional cost of living rather than official CPI, and profit sharing structures that give worker a stake in the value they create. A debt and education in the United States has built a higher education system where government-backed loans remove the price sensitivity that would normally constrain tuition increases. When a student can borrow unlimited amounts to pay and price an institutional sets, tuition will increase to absorb those loans. Restoring accountability, whether through income contingent repayment tied to actual outcome, tuition caps on federal funded programs, or more aggressive investment is a community college and technical education is solvable problem if the political will exists. On healthcare in the United States, specifically, medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy, according to research published in the American Journal of Public Health. Every other comparable economy has built system that prevents this outcome. None of this happens fast. None of it happens without engagement from exactly the people this system is pressing hardest. And understand how difficult that is when you are working long hours and trying to keep your family intact. But I believe this, and this is the core of why this show exists. A system is responsible to the people who build and sustain it. The people who drive the trucks, operate the equipment, staff the hospital, teach the children, build the houses. Those people deserve an economy whose math actually works for the effort they put in, not as charity, as a function of basic justice. The math stopped working. Understanding how it stopped working is the first step towards demanding that it starts working again. One thing to carry from today: what you are feeling is not random. The pressure, the exhaustion, the quiet, persistent sense that you are doing everything right and still falling behind. That is not personal failure. The math change, and understanding exactly what change is how you start making better decisions inside it. Not perfect decisions, not magical decisions, clearer ones. For yourself, for your family, for the future you're building anyway. If this episode gave you a language for something you have been feeling that could not name, share it with one person. Not for the show, because they probably feel it too. There is something powerful about two people realizing together that what they thought was their personal failure is actually a structural problem. That is where change begins. Next week, when the math changes, culture changes. How economic pressure reshapes the choices families make, values they hold, the future they believe are still possible for them. When money changes, culture changes. This is where we go next. Subscribe to Moral Economy Talk so you don't miss it. Because money shapes how we live, but the values decide who we become. This is Moral Economy Talk. I'm your host, Aleksandar Balta, and I will see you in next episode.